What if I told you that the peace you have been searching for has never been somewhere else, has never been a destination waiting at the end of some long and winding road, but has always been a presence that exists within you, dormant and patient, waiting not for you to find it, but for you to stop running from it? What if the exhaustion you feel, the weariness that settles into your bones after years of trying to control outcomes, manage perceptions, and force life into shapes it was never meant to hold, is not a sign of failure, but the first quiet whisper of something ancient stirring inside you, something that has been there all along, beneath the noise, beneath the striving, beneath the endless inner arguments that have kept you locked in a battle you were never meant to win? There is a particular kind of silence that arrives in a life, not when everything finally goes right, not when all the pieces fall into place according to some plan you've been clutching with white knuckles, but when something inside you simply stops. It stops fighting. It stops insisting. It stops believing that you must defend every inch of ground, justify every choice, prove every feeling. This silence does not announce itself with fanfare. It does not arrive like a revelation on a mountaintop. It comes in small moments. You are standing at the kitchen sink, hands submerged in warm water, and you notice that for the first time in months, maybe years, you are not rehearsing a conversation in your mind. You are not replaying an argument. You are not planning your next move. You are simply there, feeling the temperature of the water, hearing the faint hum of the refrigerator, noticing the way light falls across the counter. And in that moment, something shifts. Not dramatically, not permanently, perhaps, but enough that you feel it, a loosening in the chest, a breath that goes deeper than the shallow sips of air you have been taking for so long. This is not a coincidence. Nothing that happens in the interior landscape of a human life is a coincidence. Every moment of clarity, every unexpected softening, every sudden recognition that you've been holding something too tightly, these are not random events scattered across the surface of your days. They are threads in a pattern that has been weaving itself beneath your awareness, a pattern that becomes visible only when you stop trying to design it yourself. The peace that you long for, the peace that you have tried to construct through achievement, through control, through the careful management of your image and your circumstances, that peace does not arrive because you finally get it right. It returns when you stop resisting what is already here. Carl Jung spent much of his life observing the hidden movements of the psyche, the way the unconscious speaks in symbols and patterns, the way our inner world arranges itself not according to logic, but according to meaning. He understood that the persona we present to the world, the mask we wear to navigate social expectations and protect our vulnerabilities, is not the self. The self, that deeper center of being, remains largely unknown to us, hidden beneath layers of conditioning, fear, and the endless noise of a mind that believes it must always be in charge. Jung spoke of synchronicity, those moments when inner and outer reality seem to align in ways that cannot be explained by cause and effect, when the universe seems to be speaking directly to something inside you. But synchronicity is not magic. It is recognition. It is the moment when you become aware of a pattern that has always been there, waiting for your attention to shift, waiting for your resistance to soften enough that you can see it. In this exploration, I will share with you several inner shifts, several quiet signs that indicate something profound is changing within you, that the peace you have been seeking is not something you need to chase or construct, but something that is already beginning to return because the resistance that kept it away is finally loosening its grip. These are not instructions. They are not steps to follow. They are reflections, invitations to recognize something that may already be unfolding in your own life, quietly, beneath the surface of your daily routines and concerns. You may find that as you listen, certain recent experiences take on new meaning. Moments that felt like failure or confusion may reveal themselves as preparation. Silences that felt empty may show themselves to be full of something you could not yet name. Stay with this. There is no rush. Let the words settle. Let them find the places inside you that are ready to hear them. The first sign that peace is returning, that resistance is ending, often appears as a strange and unexpected disinterest in defending yourself. For years, perhaps for as long as you can remember, you have been engaged in an ongoing inner dialogue, a constant negotiation with an invisible jury that seems to be always watching, always evaluating, always ready to judge. You explain yourself to this jury. You justify your choices. You rehearse arguments for why you did what you did, why you felt what you felt, why you deserve understanding or forgiveness, or simply the right to exist as you are. This inner courtroom becomes so familiar that you stop noticing it is there. It becomes the background hum of your mental life, the constant companion of your thoughts. But then one day, something shifts. Someone misunderstands you. Someone makes an assumption about your motives or your character, and you notice that the usual surge of defensive energy does not come. The impulse to correct, to explain, to set the record straight, it rises for a moment and then fades. And you let it fade. Not because you have decided to be passive or because you no longer care about truth, but because something deeper in you recognizes that this particular battle, this need to be seen accurately by everyone, is not a battle worth fighting. It is not even a battle that can be won. This disinterest in defending yourself can feel disorienting at first. You may wonder if you're giving up, if you are becoming apathetic, if you're losing your sense of self. But this is not apathy. This is discernment. This is the beginning of a profound inner shift where you start to distinguish between what truly matters and what is simply the ego's endless need for validation. You begin to see that the version of you that exists in someone else's mind is not your responsibility. It is not something you can control, no matter how carefully you choose your words, no matter how much evidence you present. People will see you through the lens of their own wounds, their own projections, their own unexamined stories. And that is not a tragedy. That is simply how human perception works. The tragedy is when you exhaust yourself trying to manage those perceptions, when you contort yourself into shapes that you hope will be acceptable, when you lose touch with your own inner truth because you are so busy performing for an audience that will never be satisfied. Jung understood that the persona, the social mask, serve a function. It allows us to move through the world, to fulfill roles, to meet expectations. But when the persona becomes so dominant that we forget it is a mask, when we start to believe that we're the image we present rather than the complex, contradictory, ever-changing being beneath that image, we lose access to the self. And the self, that deeper center, cannot be defended. It can only be lived. It does not need to be justified because it simply is. When you stop defending yourself so fiercely, when you allow misunderstandings to exist without rushing to correct them, you are not abandoning yourself. You are returning to yourself. You are stepping out of the exhausting performance and into a quieter, more solid ground where your worth is not contingent on being understood by everyone. This shift often comes after a period of intense conflict, either external or internal. You have fought so hard, explained so much, tried so desperately to make others see you clearly, and at some point the fight just empties out. Not because you have won or lost, but because you have finally seen the futility of it. You realize that peace does not come from winning the argument. It comes from no longer needing to have the argument. It comes from recognizing that your inner sense of who you are does not require external validation to be real. This is not easy. It asks you to sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood, of being judged, of being reduced to a simplified version of yourself in someone else's narrative. But in that discomfort, if you can stay with it without rushing to fix it, something remarkable happens. You discover that you are still here. You are still whole. The misunderstanding did not erase you. The judgment did not diminish you. You remain solid and present beneath all the noise. And as you begin to trust this, as you begin to feel the relief of not having to defend every inch of your inner territory, you notice that your relationships start to change. The people who were drawn to you because they needed you to play a certain role, because they needed you to reflect back a particular image, those people may drift away. And that is okay. It is more than okay. It is necessary, because the relationships that remain, the connections that deepen, are the ones where you can be seen in your complexity, where you do not have to perform, where silence is comfortable and misunderstandings can be navigated with curiosity rather than defensiveness. You start to attract, or perhaps you start to notice, people who are also tired of performing, people who are also learning to let go of the need to control how they are perceived. And in those connections, there is a quality of ease, a quality of presence that was not possible before. The second sign that peace is returning, that resistance is loosening, appears as a growing capacity to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it or escape it. For most of your life, discomfort has been the enemy. Emotional discomfort, physical discomfort, the discomfort of uncertainty, the discomfort of not knowing what comes next. All of these have been signals that something is wrong, that something needs to be corrected, that you need to take action to restore equilibrium. And so you have developed strategies. You distract yourself. You numb yourself. You plan obsessively. You seek reassurance. You create elaborate stories about the future to soothe the anxiety of the present. These strategies are not wrong. They are human. They are the ways we have learned to survive in a world that often feels overwhelming. But they come at a cost. They keep you perpetually in motion, perpetually managing, perpetually one step away from simply being here, in this moment, with whatever is true right now. When resistance begins to end, when peace begins to return, you start to notice that you can tolerate discomfort in a way you could not before. You feel anxiety, and instead of immediately reaching for your phone or making a list or calling a friend process it, you pause. You feel the anxiety in your body. You notice where it lives, the tightness in your chest, the shallow breathing, the restless energy in your limbs. And you stay with it, not because you enjoy it, not because you have suddenly become masochistic, but because something in you has begun to understand that discomfort is not an emergency. It is information. It is the body's way of communicating, the psyche's way of signaling that something needs attention, but not necessarily action. Not every feeling requires a response. Not every uncomfortable sensation needs to be immediately resolved. This capacity to sit with discomfort is one of the most profound shifts that can happen in a human life. It changes everything. It changes how you make decisions, because you're no longer making choices purely to avoid discomfort. It changes how you relate to others, because you're no longer dependent on them to soothe or distract you from your own inner experience. It changes how you move through uncertainty, because you're no longer trying to force clarity before it's time. You begin to trust that you can handle not knowing. You begin to trust that you can feel difficult emotions without being destroyed by them. And this trust, this quiet confidence that you are more resilient than you thought, this is where peace lives. Not in the absence of discomfort, but in the ability to be present with it. Jung spoke of the shadow, those parts of ourselves that we have disowned, repressed, pushed into the darkness because they were unacceptable or frightening or inconvenient. The shadow does not go away simply because we refuse to look at it. It continues to exert influence, showing up in our projections, our compulsions, our inexplicable reactions to certain people or situations. The only way to integrate the shadow, to reclaim those disowned parts, is to be willing to sit with the discomfort of seeing them. To acknowledge the anger you have been taught is unacceptable. To feel the grief you have been told to get over. To recognize the selfishness, the pettiness, the fear, all the messy human qualities that do not fit the image you want to present. This is uncomfortable work. It is deeply uncomfortable. but it is also liberating. Because every part of yourself that you can acknowledge, every shadow element that you can bring into the light of awareness, is energy that is no longer working against you. It becomes available. It becomes integrated. It becomes part of the wholeness you're moving toward. You may notice this shift in small, everyday moments. You are in a conversation that is becoming tense, and instead of rushing to smooth things over or change the subject, you let the tension be there. You breathe. You notice your impulse to fix it, and you do not act on that impulse. You allow the other person to feel what they are feeling. You allow yourself to feel what you are feeling. And the conversation moves through the tension into something more honest, more real. Or you are facing a decision, and instead of frantically researching every option, reading every review, seeking advice from everyone you know, you sit with the not knowing. You feel the anxiety of uncertainty. You notice the mind's desperate attempts to create a sense of control, and you do not give in to those attempts. You wait. You trust that clarity will come when it is ready, not when you force it. This does not mean you become passive. It does not mean you stop taking action or making decisions. It means you stop acting from a place of panic, from a place of desperate need to escape discomfort. You start acting from a place of presence, from a place of having fully felt what is true in this moment, and then choosing a response that is aligned with your deeper values rather than your surface anxieties. This is a slower way of living. It requires patience. It requires a willingness to tolerate the space between stimulus and response, to inhabit that space fully rather than rushing through it. But in that space, in that pause, you find something you have been looking for your whole life. You find yourself, not the reactive self, not the defended self, not the performing self, but the self that is capable of presence, capable of choice, capable of responding to life rather than merely reacting to it. The third sign that peace is returning, that resistance is ending, shows itself as a quiet withdrawal from the need to convince others of your perspective. For so long, you have believed that if you could just explain it clearly enough, if you could just find the right words, the right examples, the right tone, then others would understand. They would see what you see. They would agree with you, or at least acknowledge the validity of your experience. And so you have spent countless hours in conversations that go nowhere, trying to bridge gaps that cannot be bridged through argument, trying to change minds that are not ready to be changed. You have exhausted yourself in this effort, and you have felt the frustration, the disappointment, the sense of futility that comes when you realize that no matter what you say, some people will not hear you. Not because they are bad or closed-minded, but because they are standing in a different place, looking through a different lens, living in a different story. When peace begins to return, you stop trying so hard to convince. You state your truth when it feels right to do so, and then you let it go. You do not follow up with explanations and justifications and evidence. You do not try to manage the other person's response. You simply offer what is true for you, and you trust that it will land where it is meant to land. This is not about becoming silent or withdrawing from meaningful dialogue. It is about recognizing the difference between sharing and convincing, between expressing and persuading. Sharing is an offering. It is vulnerable and open. It does not require the other person to agree or even to fully understand. It simply asks to be heard. Convincing, on the other hand, is a demand. It requires the other person to change, to adopt your perspective, to validate your experience by mirroring it back to you. And this demand, however subtle, creates tension. It creates resistance, both in the other person and in yourself. You begin to notice how much energy you have been spending on trying to get others to see things your way. You notice it in your friendships, where you feel a subtle anxiety when someone does not respond to your ideas with immediate enthusiasm. You notice it in your family, where old patterns of trying to prove yourself, trying to earn approval, trying to be understood, still play out in every conversation. You notice it in your work, where you feel the need to justify every decision, to defend every choice, to make sure everyone knows you're competent and thoughtful and deserving of respect. And you start to see that this need, this constant effort to manage how others perceive you and your ideas, is exhausting. It is a form of resistance. You are resisting the reality that other people have their own inner worlds, their own perspectives, their own journeys, and that those journeys may never intersect with yours in the way you want them to. Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, involves a gradual separation from the collective, from the mass opinions and expectations that have shaped you. It involves learning to trust your own inner authority, your own sense of what is true and right, even when that truth is not validated by the people around you. This does not mean you become arrogant or dismissive of others. It means you stop needing their agreement to feel secure in your own knowing. You recognize that truth is not a matter of consensus. Your experience is valid whether or not anyone else acknowledges it. Your perspective has worth whether or not it is popular. And when you truly internalize this, when you feel it not just as an idea, but as a lived reality, the need to convince others simply falls away. This shift can be lonely at first. You may feel isolated, misunderstood, unseen. You may grieve the loss of connection with people who only knew how to relate to you through debate and persuasion. But as you move through that loneliness, as you learn to be comfortable with your own inner knowing even when it is not reflected back to you, you discover a different kind of connection. You discover people who are interested in understanding rather than agreeing, who ask questions out of genuine curiosity rather than to find weak points in your argument, who can hold space for your truth and their truth simultaneously without needing to collapse the difference. These connections are rarer, but they're deeper. They are nourishing in a way that the old patterns of convincing and defending never were. And you begin to trust that your truth does not need to be universally accepted to be true. You begin to trust that you can hold your perspective lightly, with openness to new information and evolving understanding, without needing to defend it as if your life depends on it. Because your life does not depend on it. Your worth does not depend on being right. Your peace does not depend on winning arguments. Peace comes when you can speak your truth and then release it, when you can allow others to have their own experience without taking it as a referendum on your own. This is freedom. This is the end of a particular kind of resistance, the resistance to the reality that we are all separate beings with separate inner worlds, and that this separation is not something to be overcome through persuasion, but something to be honored, respected, even celebrated. The fourth sign that peace is returning, that resistance is loosening its hold, emerges as a decreasing need to fill every silence, every empty space, every moment of stillness with activity or noise or distraction. You have lived for so long in a state of perpetual motion, always moving toward the next thing, always planning, always consuming information, always engaged with something outside yourself. Silence has felt uncomfortable, even threatening. It has felt like a void that needs to be filled, a lack that needs to be remedied. And so you have filled it with music, with podcasts, with social media, with work, with socializing, with anything that keeps you from having to be alone with your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own presence. But as resistance begins to end, as peace begins to return, you notice that silence no longer feels like a void. It starts to feel like a presence, like something full and rich and alive. You find yourself sitting in a quiet room, and instead of immediately reaching for your phone or turning on the television, you just sit. You notice the quality of the light. You hear the sounds that you usually tune out, the hum of distant traffic, the creak of the house settling, the rhythm of your own breathing. And it is enough. You are not bored. You are not anxious. You are simply here, present with what is, and it feels like coming home to a part of yourself that you had forgotten existed. This capacity for stillness is not about becoming meditative or spiritual in some prescribed way. It is about reclaiming your own inner space, about no longer being afraid of what you might find there. For so long, you have avoided stillness because you feared what would rise up in the silence. The unprocessed grief, the unacknowledged anger, the questions you have been too afraid to ask, the loneliness that you have been running from. But when you finally stop running, when you allow yourself to be still, you discover that those things, while real and sometimes painful, are not as overwhelming as you feared. They are manageable. They are part of you. And when you can be with them, when you can acknowledge them without immediately trying to fix or change or escape them, they begin to lose their power over you. Jung spoke of the importance of turning inward, of developing a relationship with the unconscious, with the deeper layers of the psyche that are not accessible through constant external engagement. He understood that the noise of the modern world, the endless stimulation and distraction, keeps us alienated from ourselves. It keeps us living on the surface, reacting to external demands, never touching the deeper currents that move beneath. Stillness is the doorway to those deeper currents. It is the space where the unconscious can speak, where symbols and dreams and intuitions can rise into awareness, where you can begin to sense the patterns and meanings that are not visible in the rush of daily life. You may notice this shift in your relationship with technology. You find yourself less compelled to check your phone every few minutes. You can watch a sunset without feeling the need to photograph it and share it. You can have a conversation without mentally composing a post about it. You start to value the experience itself more than the documentation or broadcast of the experience. This is not about rejecting technology or becoming a purist. It is about reclaiming your attention, about recognizing that your presence, your awareness is precious, and that you have been giving it away too freely, scattering it across 1,000 superficial engagements instead of gathering it into the depth of your own lived experience. Stillness also changes your relationship with time. When you are constantly in motion, time feels scarce, pressured, something to be managed and optimized. But in stillness, time opens up. You realize that you have more time than you thought, not because your schedule has changed, but because you're no longer racing through each moment trying to get to the next one. You are here, fully, in this moment, and this moment is enough. This shift is subtle but profound. It affects how you make decisions, how you relate to deadlines and obligations, how you experience rest. Rest is no longer just the absence of activity. It becomes a quality of presence, a way of being that is restorative not because you're doing nothing, but because you're fully inhabiting your own life. As you develop this capacity for stillness, you may find that your creativity deepens, that insights arrive that were not accessible when you were constantly distracted, that solutions to problems emerge not through effortful thinking, but through the spaciousness of simply being. You may find that your relationships improve because you are more present with the people you care about, more able to listen without planning your response, more able to be with them without needing to fix or change or advise. You may find that your sense of self becomes more solid, more grounded, because you are no longer defining yourself through external achievements or validations, but through a deeper sense of who you are when no one is watching, when nothing is being performed, when you are simply here in the quiet, being yourself. The fifth sign that peace is returning, that resistance is coming to an end, reveals itself in a surprising acceptance of your own contradictions, your own inconsistencies, your own human messiness. For so long, you have tried to be coherent, to present a unified self, to make sure that all your beliefs and behaviors align in a way that makes sense, that can be explained, that fits into a neat narrative. You have judged yourself harshly for your contradictions. You have felt like a fraud when you preach one thing and do another, when you believe in kindness but feel anger, when you value simplicity but crave luxury, when you want connection but need solitude. You have tried to resolve these contradictions, to choose one side or the other, to become a person who is consistent, predictable, understandable. But as peace returns, as resistance loosens, you begin to see that these contradictions are not flaws to be fixed. They are the texture of being human. You're not one thing. You are many things, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes in sequence, sometimes in conflict with each other. And this is not a problem. This is reality. You can value health and also eat food that is not nutritious. You can love your partner and also feel moments of irritation or distance. You can be committed to growth and also need periods of stagnation. You can be strong and also need help. You can be wise and also make foolish choices. These contradictions do not cancel each other out. They coexist. They are all true, all part of the complex, ever-changing being that you are. Jung's understanding of the psyche was fundamentally dialectical. He saw that the psyche contains opposites, that consciousness and unconscious, persona and shadow, anima and animus, all exist in tension with each other. And that wholeness comes not from resolving these tensions, but from holding them, from allowing the opposites to exist simultaneously without collapsing into one or the other. This is the process of individuation, learning to be large enough to contain your own contradictions, to be comfortable with the fact that you're not a simple, one-dimensional character, but a complex, multi-layered being with depths and shadows and paradoxes. When you stop resisting your contradictions, when you stop trying to force yourself into a coherent narrative, something remarkable happens. You become more authentic, not because you have achieved some idealized version of yourself, but because you are willing to be seen in your full complexity. You stop performing consistency. You stop pretending that you have it all figured out. You allow yourself to change your mind, to evolve, to hold multiple truths at once. And this authenticity, this willingness to be messy and human and contradictory, is deeply attractive. It gives other people permission to be the same. It creates space for real connection, for conversations that go beyond the surface, for relationships that are based on truth rather than performance. You may notice this shift in how you talk about yourself. You stop making grand pronouncements about who you are and what you believe. You speak more tentatively, more exploratively, using phrases like "right now I feel," or "I'm noticing that," or "part of me thinks." You leave room for change, for nuance, for the possibility that tomorrow you might see things differently. This is not weakness. This is honesty. This is the recognition that you are not a fixed entity, but a process, a becoming, a constant unfolding that cannot be captured in a single statement or identity. And as you become more comfortable with your own contradictions, you become more tolerant of contradictions in others. You stop needing people to be consistent. You stop judging them for changing their minds or acting in ways that seem hypocritical. You recognize that they, too, are complex beings navigating the impossible task of being human, and that their contradictions are not signs of moral failure, but signs of depth, of inner conflict, of the ongoing negotiation between different parts of the self. This compassion, this willingness to see others in their full humanity rather than reducing them to simple categories of good or bad, consistent or hypocritical, this is a profound shift. It changes how you move through the world. It softens your judgments. It opens your heart. The sixth sign that peace is returning, that the long battle with yourself and the world is coming to an end, appears as a growing disinterest in maintaining certain relationships that have always required you to be less than you are. These are the relationships where you have learned to make yourself small, to hide parts of yourself, to perform a version of you that is acceptable but not true. You have maintained these relationships out of obligation, out of fear of conflict, out of the belief that you should be able to make it work if you just try hard enough. But something is shifting. You are no longer willing to contort yourself. You are no longer willing to betray your own truth for the sake of keeping the peace. because you are beginning to understand that peace built on self-betrayal is not peace at all. It is a kind of slow suffocation. This does not mean you suddenly cut people out of your life with anger or drama. It means you begin to create distance, quietly, gently. You stop initiating contact as often. You let conversations end naturally without rushing to fill the space. You notice that you feel relief rather than guilt when plans are canceled. You recognize that the energy you have been putting into maintaining these relationships is energy that could be directed toward connections that nourish you, that allow you to be fully yourself, that do not require constant self-editing and performance. And so you begin to let go, not with bitterness, but with a kind of sad clarity, an acknowledgement that this relationship served a purpose at one time, but that you have outgrown it, or perhaps that it was never truly aligned with who you are, and you are only now able to see that. This process of letting go can be painful. There is grief in it. Even relationships that were not serving you still held history, shared memories, a sense of continuity. Letting them go means acknowledging that you are changing, that you are not the person you were, and that not everyone will be able to come with you on this journey. But there is also relief. There is the sense of space opening up, of no longer carrying the weight of relationships that required you to be someone you are not. And in that space, new connections become possible. Or perhaps the space itself is enough. The simple relief of not having to perform, not having to manage someone else's expectations, not having to betray yourself for the sake of belonging. Jung spoke of the importance of psychological boundaries, of knowing where you end and another person begins. Many of us have been taught to merge, to lose ourselves in relationships, to define our worth by how well we can meet others' needs. We have been taught that love means sacrifice, that connection requires self-denial, that to be a good person, we must always put others first. But this teaching, while well-intentioned, leads to a loss of self. It leads to relationships that are based on roles rather than genuine connection, on performance rather than presence. And at some point, if you're lucky, if you're paying attention, you begin to see this. You begin to see that you've been giving yourself away, piece by piece, and that what remains is a hollow version of who you truly are. When peace returns, when resistance ends, you reclaim yourself. You set boundaries not out of anger or selfishness, but out of a deep respect for your own being, for your own needs, for your own truth. You recognize that you cannot pour from an empty cup, that you cannot be genuinely present for others if you are not present for yourself, that the most loving thing you can do is to be honest about what you can and cannot offer. And this honesty, while it may disappoint some people, while it may lead to the ending of certain relationships, is ultimately more respectful than the false generosity of pretending to be available when you are not, pretending to be okay with things that hurt you, pretending to be someone you're not. As you let go of relationships that require self-betrayal, you may find that other relationships deepen. The people who can meet you in your truth, who do not need you to be anyone other than who you are. These relationships become richer, more intimate, more real. You discover that vulnerability is not weakness, but strength, that showing up as you truly are invites others to do the same, that the connections built on truth are far more resilient than the connections built on performance. And you begin to trust that you do not need to be everything to everyone, that it is enough to be yourself, fully and honestly, and to let that be the basis of your relationships. The seventh sign that peace is returning, that the long war with reality is ending, shows itself in a quiet acceptance of things you cannot change. For so long, you've been fighting against your circumstances, fighting against your past, fighting against the limitations of your body or your mind or your situation. You have believed that acceptance means resignation, that to stop fighting means to give up, to become passive, to let life happen to you rather than actively shaping it. But this is a misunderstanding. Acceptance is not resignation. It is the recognition of what is true, the acknowledgement of reality as it actually is rather than as you wish it to be. And this recognition, rather than leading to passivity, actually frees up enormous amounts of energy that have been trapped in resistance, energy that can now be directed toward what is actually possible, toward the choices that are actually available to you. You begin to see that much of your suffering has come not from your circumstances themselves, but from your resistance to those circumstances, from your insistence that things should be different, from your constant mental argument with reality. You have been living in a state of if only. If only you had made different choices. If only other people had behaved differently. If only you had been born into different circumstances. If only the world were fair. And this if only thinking has kept you stuck, unable to move forward, unable to work with what is actually here because you are so busy wishing it were something else. When peace returns, the if only thinking begins to quiet. You start to see your life as it is, with all its imperfections and limitations and disappointments, and instead of fighting against it, you ask a different question. You ask, given that this is true, what now? Given that I cannot change the past, what is possible in the present? Given that certain things are outside my control, what do I actually have agency? This shift from resistance to acceptance, from if only to what now, is transformative. It moves you from a position of victimhood to a position of empowerment. Not because your circumstances have changed, but because your relationship to those circumstances has changed. Jung's concept of the transcendent function speaks to this process. The transcendent function is the psyche's ability to hold opposites in tension until a third thing emerges, a new perspective or possibility that was not visible when you were identified with one side or the other. When you're locked in resistance, you are identified with the position that things should be different. You are fighting against what is. But when you can accept what is, when you can hold both the reality of your circumstances and your desire for something different without collapsing into either resignation or denial, something new becomes possible. A creative response emerges. You see options that were not visible before. You find ways to move forward that honor both your limitations and your agency. This acceptance often comes after a period of exhaustion, after you have fought so hard and so long that you simply cannot fight anymore. You reach a point of surrender, not because you have been defeated, but because you have finally seen the futility of the battle. And in that surrender, in that moment of letting go, you discover that what you were fighting against was not as terrible as you thought. You discover that you can live with it, that you can work with it, that it does not define you or limit you in the ways you feared. You discover that acceptance is not the end of hope, but the beginning of realistic hope. Hope that is grounded in what is actually possible rather than in fantasy or denial. You may notice this shift in how you relate to your body, to aging, to illness, to the inevitable losses that come with being human. You stop fighting against the passage of time. You stop trying to control every aspect of your health. You accept that your body has its own wisdom, its own timeline, its own limitations, and that your job is not to dominate it, but to listen to it, to work with it, to respect it. This does not mean you stop taking care of yourself. It means you stop approaching your body as an enemy to be conquered and start approaching it as a companion to be honored. Or you may notice this shift in how you relate to your past. You stop replaying old hurts, stop wishing things had been different, stop blaming yourself or others for what happened. You accept that your past is what it is, that it shaped you in certain ways, that it gave you both wounds and strengths, and that you cannot change it. And in that acceptance, the past loses its power over you. It becomes simply what happened, not a source of ongoing shame or regret or resentment. You are free to be here, now, without constantly dragging the weight of what was. The eighth and final sign that peace is returning, that resistance is ending, reveals itself in a profound shift in how you experience time. For most of your life, you have been living in the future or the past, rarely in the present. You have been planning, anticipating, worrying about what comes next, or you have been replaying, regretting, analyzing what has already happened. The present moment has been just a brief way station between past and future, a place you pass through on your way to somewhere else. But as peace returns, as resistance loosens, you find yourself increasingly able to be here, now, without needing to be anywhere else, without needing this moment to be different or better or more significant than it is. This shift is subtle but unmistakable. You are drinking your morning coffee, and for once you are not thinking about your to-do list or checking your phone or planning your day. You are simply tasting the coffee, feeling its warmth, noticing the way the light comes through the window. You are walking, and you're not walking to get somewhere, but simply walking, feeling your body move, noticing the rhythm of your steps, the quality of the air. You are with another person, and you're not thinking about what to say next, or how you are being perceived, or what you need to accomplish in this interaction. You are simply there, present, listening, being. This presence, this ability to be fully here, is not something you achieve through effort or discipline. It is something that arises naturally when resistance ends, when you stop fighting against what is, when you stop trying to be somewhere other than where you are. It is the fruit of all the other shifts we have explored. When you stop defending yourself, stop trying to convince others, stop filling every silence, stop betraying yourself in relationships, stop fighting against what you cannot change, you naturally become more present. Because presence is what remains when all the noise falls away. It is your natural state, the state you return to when you are no longer running from yourself. Jung understood that the psyche has its own intelligence, its own movement toward wholeness. He called it the individuation process, the gradual unfolding of the self, the movement toward becoming who you truly are. This process cannot be forced. It cannot be rushed. It happens in its own time, according to its own logic, and it requires presence. It requires that you be here, now, available to what is arising, willing to meet each moment as it comes rather than trying to control or predict or manage the unfolding. When you're constantly in the future or the past, you are not available for this process. You are not available for the subtle shifts, the quiet insights, the small synchronicities that are trying to guide you toward wholeness. As you become more present, you may notice that your sense of urgency decreases. Things that once felt desperately important start to feel less so. Not because you no longer care, but because you're no longer caught in the anxiety of future outcomes. You can care deeply about something and still be at peace with not knowing how it will turn out. You can work toward goals without being attached to specific results. You can engage fully with life without needing to control it. This is a paradox that the mind cannot grasp, but that the heart understands. The more present you are, the more effective you become, not because you're trying harder, but because you are acting from a place of clarity and alignment rather than from a place of fear and grasping. And in this presence, you begin to notice beauty that was always there, but that you were too distracted to see. The way light falls across a wall, the expression on a stranger's face, the sound of rain, the feeling of your own breath. These small, ordinary moments become extraordinary, not because they have changed, but because you are finally here to experience them. And you realize that this is what you have been searching for all along. Not some grand achievement or perfect circumstance, but simply the ability to be here, fully alive, fully present, in the midst of your ordinary, imperfect, beautiful life. All of these signs, these shifts, these quiet transformations are not separate events. They are different expressions of the same underlying process, the process of resistance ending, of peace returning. They are the signs that you are coming home to yourself, that you are learning to live from a place of presence rather than performance, from a place of acceptance rather than constant striving, from a place of inner authority rather than external validation. This is not a destination you arrive at. It is a way of being that you gradually inhabit more and more fully. There will be days when you slip back into old patterns, when the resistance returns, when you find yourself defending and convincing and filling every silence and betraying yourself and fighting against reality. This is normal. This is human. The path is not linear. But each time you notice, each time you recognize what is happening and gently return a presence, you strengthen the capacity to live from this deeper place. If you are recognizing these signs in your own life, if something in these words is resonating with your own experience, I invite you to simply notice. You do not need to do anything with this recognition. You do not need to make it into a project or a practice or a goal. Simply notice. Notice when you're defending yourself and when you're able to let that go. Notice when you're trying to convince someone and when you're able to simply share your truth and release it. Notice when you are filling silence and when you are able to be still. Notice when you are betraying yourself in relationship and when you are able to honor your own truth. Notice when you are fighting against what is and when you're able to accept it. Notice when you're lost in past or future and when you are able to be present. Just notice. This noticing, this simple awareness, is itself the practice. It is the doorway. It is how peace returns. You might also consider spending a few minutes each day in silence, not meditating in any formal sense, not trying to achieve any particular state, but simply sitting with yourself, being with whatever is present. Or you might write, not to create something or to process something, but simply to give voice to what is moving inside you, to let the words flow without judgment or editing. These simple practices, if they feel right to you, can support the process that is already unfolding, but they are not necessary. The process is happening whether you do anything or not. It is happening because resistance is exhausting and cannot be maintained forever. It is happening because peace is your natural state, and you are simply returning to it. If this exploration has touched something in you, if it has helped you see your own experience with new eyes, I would be grateful if you would like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your reflections in the comments. Not because I need validation, but because your sharing might be the very thing that helps someone else recognize what is happening in their own life. We are all walking each other home, and sometimes a single comment, a single shared experience, can be the light that helps someone see their path more clearly. Peace does not arrive. It returns. It returns when you stop fighting, when you stop resisting, when you stop trying to be someone you are not. It returns when you allow life to be what it is, when you allow yourself to be who you are, when you finally come home to the present moment. And it has been waiting for you all along, patient and quiet, beneath all the noise, beneath all the striving, beneath all the fear. It is here now. It has always been here. You are simply remembering.